Well, Tuesday, a few hours before the British government had planned to send some asylum seekers to Rwanda, a ruling by the European Court of Human Rights stopped the move. The court ruled that an Iraqi man due to fly yesterday night was not good to move, as he faced a real risk of irreversible harm. Now, that decision proved enough for the UK government to stop the entire flight altogether, as they face more cases on an individual basis. How significant is this deal with Rwanda to the UK government? What is it trying to stop? What's the potential of these deportees finding solace in Rwanda? We'll unpack all of this on the square today, plus King Philip's visit to DRC. Welcome to VSA. I'm Sulaiman. In April, the UK government struck a deal with Rwanda to send unprocessed asylum seekers to East Africa for processing. The deal, believed to be in the region of £120 million, will see the UK government help the Rwanda government to cater for these groups of people. Majority of these asylum seekers come from Afghanistan, Iraq, and some African countries with no approved legal routes for these people. The UK government typically receives more asylum seekers than other European heavyweights, including France and Germany. More than 10,000 asylum seekers have arrived in the UK alone this year, and the country, in its bid to reduce future occurrences, is making the UK less hospitable. Now, Prime Minister Boris Johnson said some criminal gangs earn money to send asylum seekers to the UK, but the human rights angle to this issue leaves many questions. Just before we delve fully into Rwanda, in nearby DR Congo, there are the regrets of old actions by the Belgian government. Belgium's King Philip expressed regrets to DR Congo for the atrocities of Belgian colonialists in the resource-rich DR Congo. Now, King Leopold II is known as one of the most devastating colonialists ever in Africa's history, killing millions of Congolese and denying them of what's truly theirs. Now, for the second time in 2 years, King Philip is warming up to DR Congo, and the question is, why now? Now, joining me to unpack this is Nweke. He's Chairman Emeritus, Board of Trustees, Nigerians in the Diaspora Organization, Europe, and Sonny Lambe. He's a Southwark Labour and Cooperative Councillor, community leader, author of the book Unbroken, A Dream for My Sister. And he's also a business management consultant with over 30 years experience in London. Gentlemen, good to have you on the square. Thanks for your time. And well, before we delve into the UK-Rwanda issue, let's start with you, Collins. And this is of great importance, knowing full well that apart from your service to the people, you're also based in Belgium. What do you make of King Philip's visit, finally, to DR Congo?
Thank you, Salah, for having me. Well, King Philip's visit to DR Congo was expected to have taken place, long before now. As a matter of fact, it was planned to happen on the occasion of the 60th anniversary of independence of Congo from Belgium. That was in 2020. But as a consequence of COVID-19, it couldn't happen then. And the timing was so very important because it was important for the king to use that occasion of the 60th, independence anniversary to hone home the statement of regrets that he had published, shortly before that. Eventually it had been postponed, 3 times until finally he made it out. And I think that the most important thing is that he finally made it. Now, the timing is significant, is crucial that it was done at the time that he's doing it. Now, next to the timing, you also need to look at the composition of his entourage, because that tells a little bit of, story behind, the visit itself, the trip. Now, he went with him, the Prime Minister of Belgium. So what we're looking at is that the head of state, that is the king, and then the political head of the country, which is the Prime Minister, both of them made the trip together. That is crucial. Crucial because it means that they are taking it seriously, very, very seriously at the highest level of government, because politics is also involved. And as we can see, I think there is every reason to regard this as a journey of decolonization. And from the activities that he, participated in while he visited, and the symbolic gesture of returning one of the stolen artifacts, to the people of Congo, all points to, a new partnership, a new chapter in the relationship between, DR Congo and Belgium.
And Collins, many people are asking why now, considering he's also sent a message to the country in 2020 during their 60th independence anniversary.
Yeah, why now? I think it's long overdue. I think the public opinion out here in Belgium is shifting very, very drastically. And I do believe that one of the critical things that, commentators have not quite been highlighting about all of this is that, one of the great grandchildren of King Leopold, a young girl in her early 20s, actually did, join a protest and did speak very, very loudly against, the atrocities committed by, her ancestor. And so what that tells you is that, we are looking at a generation of new Belgians who cannot stomach, who cannot tolerate, the dilly-dallying about accepting responsibilities for the atrocities committed against the Congolese during the, colonial era. And so that being the case, they decided that it is now time to own up. It is now time to begin to build that, new partnership. So yes, the timing couldn't have been, better.
And there hasn't been an apology until now, but regrets. And, for Africans, they like to go straight out. Regrets and apology are two different things for Africans. How will this visit affect the relationship between both countries moving forward?
Well, you mentioned, the difference between apology and a regret. And yeah, we need to be clear about it. What the king has done is actually, send out a deep message of regrets. That was not an apology. But you see, the intent is different. It's the same. It is just the technicalities because, of course, an apology carries with it a completely different set of consequences and implications. You then begin to, deal with issues of reparation, financial compensation, and so on and so forth. And let's also remember that the atrocities that we are talking about were committed between 1885 and 1908, and they're carrying on to the period when, Congo was regarded as a Belgian, free state, and then to independence in 1960, I believe, June 1960. So you see, and even after the independence, some of these atrocities actually continue. So you see, we are talking of a long period of time, and reparation, financial compensation, they are all very complicated. And I believe that the government of Belgium is faced with, the worries of what, the consequences of an apology would bring, and the question of where do you draw the line. But, of course, very, very many people, including here in Belgium, actually expect an apology to take place. Whether that will eventually come is a matter of wait and see.
Well, okay, now let me bring in Sonny. Sonny, let's, well, I hope you understand, we needed to set that right. You know, there's no way I was going to have Collins here without asking him his comments, you know, on that. But again, before we dig in deep, Sonny, I'd like you to speak to us about your book. I'm fascinated, you know, about the title, Unbroken, A Dream for My Sister. If you can, let's start with that before we dig in deep.
First of all, I want to say a big thank you for inviting me on your program. Nice to see you, Collins. It's been a while. A dream, Unbroken, a dream for my sister. I think from the title, you can actually, you know, the ideas from what is beneath, what is behind that particular book. Unbroken, it relates to myself and my family, especially my sister, what we went through when we were little children. As you know, anyone who came from a very dysfunctional family background, especially in African setting, we always have a story to tell. And, you know, wasn't an, you know, exception in that regard. So, but you come through that, through those challenges, and, you know, you can imagine I didn't start, you know, primary school, even up to the age of 13, 14. You may not believe this, you know. At least I can communicate with you in English now, and it's a pity I can't speak French. I think the only French I speak is when it is dark, so you have to forgive me for that one. So, but on a serious note, so you can, you know, so Unbroken. If you then go to my, you know, bio and see some letters, you know, academic letters after my name, even some people ask me whether I've been studying most of my life. So when I tell them my little story, what I've been through, they couldn't believe that I didn't actually start school. I couldn't read or write until age of, you know, age of 13, 14, which is remarkable. And what is important, why, so of course, I would suggest people should, I just give you a taster, then people can then buy the book and read the rest. But important?
It's quite an interesting story. Sorry, I don't mean to butt in, I don't mean to cut you there, but again, listening to you, I think we already have the teaser there for a man.
Actually, I want to give you the second part of the teaser. You know, it's Unbroken, then A Dream for My Sister.
All right, then.
So part of it is me and my sister, and the other side is actually my sister and myself. So the, you know, the other part, which is A Dream for My Sister. And it's quite telling, you know, in African set, especially Nigeria, for instance, you know, I mean, the part of Nigeria come from the Yoruba land. I don't know, probably the same thing in the East, I guess, or maybe it's common among, you know, around Africa, probably the same, whereby they think the place of the woman, you know, you just, you know, there's no point for you to go to school, to go to learn. All you need to do is just learn some trade, and you end up with your husband and be happy after. So therefore, my older sister was not sent to school. So we didn't have any formal academic qualification of any kind.
Let's whet the appetite of the would-be reader. Don't end it. Let's leave it hanging there. Let's leave it hanging there. It's going to do us all the good.
You know.
So now, Sonny, let me jump in now. Now, I want us to hang it there so that people can you know, have the appetite to want to read the book. Now, let's talk about what's happening now. You know, the UK's plan to send asylum seekers to Rwanda. When that news first hit you as a councillor, what came to mind?
To be honest with you, I mean, first of all, I'd like to say that controlling immigration is the prerogative of any country, any government. I mean, let's put that, of course. Where a bit of emotion comes in is when governments start deciding which immigrants should be allowed to come in, and which immigrants should be sent to other parts of the world. And so therefore, it was not long ago when we heard the government saying refugees are welcome. But unfortunately, when we then saw through the war going on in Ukraine and so on, when we then saw the difference between different classes of immigrants and refugees. So obviously, anyone, irrespective of party politics, political affiliation, as a human being, you begin to question the integrity of such policy that discriminates again one class of refugees from the other. And then, and the other side of it, one needs to look at is the fact that now government wants to ship refugees from UK to Africa, to Rwanda. Then you begin to think, why, what is that what Africa needs? I mean, this question I actually tweeted a few days ago, saying, Africa doesn't need, immigration processing center. What Africa needs is factories, industries, jobs, to create employment. So, and I then look at some years, I think about a decade and a half or 2 decades ago when Labour was in government, I remember the former leader of the Labour Party, Tony Blair, actually, I remember his phrase, tackling crime and causes of crime. If you then use the same principle, you can tackle you can tackle immigration or refugee and the causes of refugee and why people have to leave their comfort and go through that dangerous journey to go to another country, irrespective of whether it's in Europe, UK, it doesn't matter. But the fact that people have to leave their comfortable home where their family and extended family are, then we need to look at causes of that. I think that is where I actually think perhaps government need to look at how fair that policy is to those who arrive on our shores, whether they have papers or not. We then ship them to another country for processing. And then what happened to Rwanda when later on, when some of these people will then realize actually they are actually not eligible for to be allowed to come into the UK. And if these people refuse to leave Rwanda, that becomes Rwandan government problem. And then that can also create tension even within our own population, within our own citizenship as well. You can also look at when I was looking at watching the telly this afternoon, I saw how nice it's actually the hostel actually looked like Savoy Hotel, or the best hotel in Nigeria, for instance. You have one set of asylum seekers, refugees, in very nice hotel that you can compare. He's saying is equivalent to lodging somebody Hilton or
all right. Okay, let me bring in Collins now. Collins,
yeah.
Looking at what's happening, and I know that there's also what's known in refugee law as a principle of non-refoulement, whereby you're not expected or you're not to send someone to where he or she is coming from, especially where there's an established, well-founded fear of persecution before flight. Now, from a human rights angle, do you think this paints either the UK or Rwanda in good light?
Certainly not, Sulai. As a matter of fact, there are even indications that the actions of Boris Johnson has, essentially murdered the Geneva Convention that gave the rights to individuals fleeing persecution to be heard in the country of their choice. Now, some have said, like Sonny alluded to, that the hostel where they are going to be housed is beautiful and so on and so forth. Well, those individuals they knew about Rwanda, but they chose the UK, and the least that the UK could do is hear them out, make an individual assessment of their application, and then determine whether they qualify or not. Now, not doing that is inhuman. And let us also consider one of the points that you raised, Sulai, which is in regards to the human rights records of the destination country. We have known from records, and very recent one, and it's not me speaking, there had been an international, committee set up to look at atrocities, and even human rights organizations have decried the state of human rights in Rwanda. Now, this has nothing to do with President Kagame, who in many fronts is seen to be leading a vanguard of African leaders in terms of reform, in terms of futuristic, leadership thoughts and so on and so forth. But on the issue of human rights, I do believe that they have quite some questions to ask. Now, choosing Rwanda for such a project, I mean, quite apart from how despicable the thought of it, the idea in itself is, choosing Rwanda is also a very, very catastrophic error. And, the groundswell of opposition against, this scheme is just so much. But it does look like the British, government under Boris Johnson is determined to see this through, notwithstanding, the outcry from left, right, and center.
Collins, put us into some of the conversation before we go to Sonny, and that's the perception which some Rwandans and some Africans do share now. They feel the money the UK will give the Rwanda government will help advance its status to an extent.
Well, that is a misapplication. It is a misapplication of resources, because imagine if such resources is actually channeled into investments in Rwanda. I think it makes a whole lot of sense. Or let us even imagine for a moment that the British government decided that such fund will be used in resettling the individuals in the UK, give them some training, because they have been very, very creative, ideas from different parts of the world where immigrants, let me make the distinction here between refugees or asylum seekers and economic migrants, a term that some have chosen to use. So once you've gone through the whole process and you have not been recognized as a refugee, then many countries are using some ideas of investing in such individuals, either to give them some skills that they can use in the destination country, or when they return back to their country of origin or a third country, that they become useful to themselves. These are creative ideas, but it does look like Boris Johnson is actually set to use this as a means of sending a message out to people that Britain will not welcome you. They are going to be very, very hard on you, and this is meant to be a deterrent. But as we speak, more than 5,000 individuals have actually crossed the border. So the deterrent effect is not working. And indeed, the resources could have been better applied than being used in this manner.
Well, I'll come back to you, Sonny, and you have called those centers immigration processing centers. And if you look at some of the key concerns Collins has raised, one of it is that it hasn't actually deterred people from coming into the UK where you are at the moment. So are there any advantages the Rwanda government is expected to get from this deal?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Colin is absolutely right. I was watching telly earlier on, and I saw a new set of, undocumented immigrants coming through. So therefore, if the policy was to deter more people coming, it has failed, in my opinion. And coming back to what I was saying earlier on, is about fighting the causes of people having to become immigrants, having to become refugees, having to run away from their own country, their own home, their own comfort zone, to go through that very treacherous route, to go to another country. I think it's something we need to look at. Causes of our why is that? Is it because of war? Is it because of famine? Is it because of all those things we should be looking at? And I believe we're talking about Belgium earlier on. I believe some of these countries where all these refugees are coming from, I think actually our own British government have some responsibility towards them, helping them to make those countries comfortable, help them resolve conflicts that actually forces them to leave their own country, encouraging British companies to go and, set up factories where those people are gainfully employed. If you go back to the 80s, if you remember 70s, 80s, if you gave Nigerians to come and live in the Western world, especially UK, they will say, no, thank you. In fact, when you get to the immigration, they used to beg us, how long are you coming? Especially if you travel one or twice, they probably give you a permanent, stay right at the immigration center, at the airport. But now people beg, people do all sorts of things to get through. So what's that telling you? When in the 70s and early 80s, when Nigeria economy was buoyant, we used to receive people from other parts of Africa, Ghana, and everywhere. Nigerians didn't want to go out until everything messed up. I believe similar, case for these people leaving their own comfort zone, leaving their own countries to come to the UK or any other country of their choosing. So that is why we need to look at the causes of why people actually have to leave their own country to become immigrants with no hope or even getting a status in those countries. I know how many refugees as asylum seekers in my own constituency, for instance, and I know what kind of support, because you're looking at housing, you look at school, especially if they have children. So you look at all the resources, which may not necessarily be in place. And sometimes you also create tension between those new arrivals and those who are already settled there. You'll be surprised. No, actually about Cllr now is also about, even those people who look like them, who now say actually they have to fight over resources. So we have to be objective in looking at this thing. But where I blame the government, I don't think perhaps government is just looking for headline rather than actually looking at the causes of people having to leave their own countries, their own comfort zone to come and seek refuge in the UK.
Some of the I think one beautiful angle you've opened is look at the causal, effect, the causative effect that would make anyone, take to flight, and especially for Africans, because we know some are Iraqis, Afghanistan, and some other countries. But I can see the concern about the continent, and this again has been linked to, corruption and mismanagement of resources on the continent, which of course before now, Collins and I, we've had that conversation. But again, Collins, the reaction of the African community in the UK, because Sonny has just said they also, within his council, there are some others who are seeking refuge there. Perhaps we should start talking about African community in the UK, considering that a good number of asylum seekers are from perhaps Africa. Collins, what do you think should be done, or how can these people be helped so that they don't run, because some have what they call genuine fear of persecution, so that you don't run into the hands of your pursuer?
Well, first and foremost, I believe that this has got to be an all of society affair. Now, I say this pretty loosely because at this moment, we are pointing the fingers at the UK, but actually, when you take a look up there at the European level, you will find that the EU has actually, done quite a number of things and still plan to do quite a number of things that are pretty unholy against these immigrants, whether they are asylum seekers, those fleeing persecution, or those fleeing hard economic realities in their countries. Take, for instance, the activity of the EU around the Libyan, Lebanon, and also Libya, as a matter of fact, where they set up shop there actually to deter people and to process applications in those third countries, so rather than allowing them to get to their destination countries in Europe. So you see, things had already started going very, very bad at the European level. A number of European countries, were also copying the same system, the same scheme. It's just that Boris Johnson has actually taken it to a new level. Now, what has to happen is, look, this is an issue that runs very, very deep. The causes of people leaving their countries most of the time will be traced to the activities of these Western countries. Some of them are actually engineered in such a manner that the purpose is for the Western countries to sell their arms to the conflict countries that actually produce the refugees that then come back to cause serious disruptions to their system. Now, I think the concept of national interest has got to now be much better defined. I mean, in terms of redefining it such that it includes activities of these Western countries in developing countries that create ungovernable situations for them when the refugees begin to come. So they have to reassess very, very critically the way they relate with African or developing countries. I think more emphasis has got to go on trade rather than aid. I'm not saying stop aid, but I think the balance has got to now be redefined. And I also think that those who believe that supporting, for instance, job creation initiatives in developing countries is not part of the national interest of the Western countries, they've got to start thinking again, because when these young people in Africa and developing countries don't find employment, they will leave their countries and your country is their destination. And finally, I should add that migration is as old as the world. And anybody who thinks that through draconian measures or building long walls, is going to keep, young people from migrating, well, we have seen that it has failed and failed woefully. Young people should actually be encouraged to explore the world. There is absolutely nothing wrong with that, but it has to be done in such, a manner that is legal, because the more you tighten, the borders, the more desperate people get, and definitely they are getting into your country. So the whole system has failed, and the reassessment is now necessary that puts migration as a positive thing and not a negative thing. I think that is what
and Collins, listening to you now would, mean the world is now coming together as one. And if we go back to what COVID-19 has shown, it looks as real as real. Whatever happens to one part of the continent has a ripple effect to another part. Now, Sonny, do you see the British government bouncing back from this, as Priti Patel, the Home Secretary, has said?
Well, if you go back to what I said earlier, I think, I don't know whether it just headline grabbing that led to this. This is why they probably need to go back to the drawing table and reconsider whether it's actually a reasonable policy to pursue. I mean, if you, coming back to what, Collins, just alluded us to, Most of these, these, refugees, and you find that it's always war that is probably the main cause of this. Because when people's homes are destroyed, their livelihood is destroyed, and there's no chances of how to recoup them back. And then the next thing they think about is, I want to get out of here. If you probably remember the phrase in Nigeria so many years ago, probably a few decades ago, Andrew, I'm checking out. Everybody wants to check out. And immigration should be seen as a positive thing, especially for young people, because traveling is an experience on its own. Unfortunately, because there's no legal means for people to travel, especially to the Western world, and the picture would have been, the Western world had given people, especially people from Africa and Asia, is as if it's a paradise. So therefore, they see where their immediate environment as the hell, and they want to go to paradise, which is Europe. And therefore, I think the soft power of British government, in fact, Western government, they need to use that as well. Because you find that even some of the money grants, aids given to some of these countries, a fraction, only a trickle of it actually get to the people that actually need it. You find the money probably never even left the Western bank accounts, Switzerland, UK banks, and so on. And because of all kind of corruption, fraud, and so on. So all these things is part of fighting the causes of refugee, asylum seeker, immigration, even economic immigrations, as some people want to describe it. Because people are comfortable in their own environment, their own country. If they want to travel, they want to go and explore the world, and they want to quickly come back home. They won't become economic refugees, as some people want to make them, turn them to. So therefore, I think the government, especially the British government, to look at it. Of course, the issue is not concluded yet, because I was watching the BBC earlier on. I think the European Court of Justice, I think, under human rights, I think they are now looking at the case whether, so it's not been settled. So I think it's probably next few days, next week, we see whether even those whom they wanted to take to Rwanda, actually, they have the legal right to do so. So the British power to do that has been challenging core. And thank God we actually have a legal system that actually works, which we can force the government through judicial review to see whether I think what they are doing is actually legitimate or not.
Let me bring in Collins here now. We're talking about laws and some precedents. Collins, how significant is the European Convention on Human Rights ruling, to precedents, especially when you consider that many countries in Europe also receive asylum seekers?
Well, it is significant to an extent, because it cannot force the hands of the UK. I mean, in terms of turning the hands of the clock back, the UK can still press ahead and do what they want to do, and we have seen that Boris Johnson is, hell-bent on pressing ahead. Now, for some other European countries, that actually take human rights abuses seriously and do not want to be in the wrong side of history, oh yes, this will certainly cause them to rethink. But coming back to UK under Boris Johnson, we have seen how much he tries to use legislative amendments to get things that he actually won, even when it is clear that they contravene international law. But all the European leaders, all the European countries are not that way, and that is where actually the ruling of the committee, the commission.
Let me stay with you a bit, Collins, because I will come back to you, Sonny, because this looks like a failed Brexit pain. how is it that now the UK is looking over Europe and onto Africa? Because there are many African immigrants in France and Germany. Collins, what does this mean to them?
Well, what it means to them is that we are beginning to see a very deep crack in the wall on which Brexit, the UK leaving the EU was actually written. I mean, Sonia and I had, very long conversations and maybe even disagreements in the run-up to, Brexit. He sees it differently, I see it differently, but here we are. The UK actually built a false narrative regarding the reason they want to leave regarding Brexit. Immigration was high on the agenda. They made it look as if once they leave the EU, they will be able to manage their immigration policies and do as they please. And part of what we're seeing now is the desperation to actually deliver on the false promises they made to the British people that necessitated the vote to leave the EU. Now, other countries, of course, one of the things I feel happy about is that the sort of publicity that this issue is receiving. Look at us in Village Square, Africa, spending time talking about it, creating awareness. I believe that is making policy advisors in different European capitals to have a reassessment of the draft policy that they actually have somewhere, in their system, waiting to be unleashed. Because we'll be making a mistake to think that Boris Johnson was alone. No, Boris Johnson isn't alone. Like I alluded to, the EU had also done some unholy, practices in the past, and many other European countries were going to follow suit. But with this barrage of criticisms and opposition, I believe that the end is going to justify the means.
And Sonny, I want you to react to that, if you don't mind.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, personally, there's nothing wrong in two people or two countries or multiple countries coming together to form a union. It's just like marriage. But the problem is when one side starts dictating to the other. That's where the problem is. And you and Collins, we had this argument in the past. If in fact, the war going on between Russia and Ukraine, you saw the position of Hungary, for instance, how it puts its foot down, I'm not going to accept this. You also saw the relation, what is also transpired in the last few days between Turkey and two European countries, I've forgotten their names now, who refuse to accept them into the alliance, to the NATO alliance, simply because they believe, for whatever reason, each side will always have their own reason for doing and not doing certain things. So coming back to this, it's the same point in relation to us in UK. Yes, if you go back to when Mrs. Thatcher was there are certain rules, whether in agriculture, whether in other areas, they're always top down. And you just like husband and wife. With the husband, especially in the traditional marriage, you keep on dictating to the wife. One day the wife will say, you know what, I'm not your slave. I'm out of here. It's a partnership. I think this is what we need to look at in any union. And it's not surprising that because each country wants to have control over what happens on their own territory. And UK is an exception to that. So we want to have control over what happens in the UK, and we don't want EU or any country to dictate to us. So that's why I'm saying we need to work together and look at what are the causes of this problem and how can we work together to resolve them. And this is where I blame the government, especially in terms of this Rwanda policy. It's not, I don't think they thought it very carefully, because if they had done that, they wouldn't have done it at all, because you have different classes of refugees. And what's the implication of that in the Rwandans? And also the refugees and asylum seekers who are not actually coming through UK, who are already there. I was watching the video, the telly, I think about 3 days ago, and they show us some who went directly to Rwanda. These are refugees and asylum seekers, and those where they are living, the living condition, and then compared to these hostel that will look like Southwark Hotel for those who are coming from the UK, how do you think they're going to feel like? There's already going to be a tension, if it's not already there, between these different classes of refugees, asylum seekers. So this is what we need to look at. And I think our own British government need to have a rethink on this policy, whether it's actually to the interest of both countries, as they claim to be.
And Sonny, quickly here, what are your constituents saying, especially those who have African descent? What are they saying about this UK-Rwanda partnership?
I mean, there are mixed feelings, because there are people on humanitarian side thought that yes, these people, you can't just push them away. If they are going to have a better, condition, why not? Whereas majority are saying, actually, we should be doing that here. And then, this processing center should be built somewhere in the UK. After all, they came to the UK. They didn't go to Rwanda. So therefore, we should, process them here. And those who do not meet the criteria, then they should find a very humane way of letting them go back to their respective countries, and also helping those countries they came from, even if they're economic immigrants. What can we do to support those countries they came from? Because that is why, coming back to what I said earlier, that is why people are leaving their own countries, war, famine, and all the rest of it. These are the reasons why people are leaving. If they have, if they are comfortable in their own country, they wouldn't just pack everything, their children, their, everything, sell their belongings, and want to go on this treacherous journey that they don't even know where it's going to lead them. Some of them die on the way. These are the feedback I'm getting from my constituents. Yeah.
All right, let me jump in here, and this is to you, Collins. We're also thinking of how Rwanda treats African refugees. Does it spark enough hope?
Far from it. It doesn't spark any hope. We may have seen beautiful hostels, that look like 3-star hotels, but we also, have heard of, orders of shoot at sites because, asylum seekers or refugees in Rwanda decided that they were going to protest, which is, their right, by the way, to protest, conditions that they deplore, that they find deplorable. And, we saw how they were treated, and consequently, Rwanda was condemned for that. Now, that a democratically elected leader of a major Western civilization would choose to do this sort of business with such a country beggars belief. And, Africans, I don't know, the picture in the UK is probably a bit different, a mixed feeling. But I can tell you that, African diaspora out here in, in the continent are almost unanimous in, condemning what the British government is doing. And as we speak, quite some efforts are being put together to, continue to protest this, to continue to speak out until things are done differently.
And speaking out, we will. Let's start winding down, and we go back to you, Sonny. You started off by talking about looking at the causes. There are lessons, no doubt, in this whole deal with Rwanda and the UK. Now, let's talk about some lessons and see how specifically African leaders, how they can make their countries and the continent, by extension, a better place and see less and less of Africans trooping out to Europe and other places. Sonny.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. You see some countries in Africa, for instance, they sell crude oil to the West, and they then buy back processed petrol. Now, look at how much value is being added in the West before it comes back to Africa. And then they don't even have, they have to borrow even to buy petrol, which has been processed probably 10 times what they sold the crude oil or those semi-finished product to the West. So they need to start looking at how can we begin to set up industries, factories that we can actually process some of this raw material we have and then sell the finished product to the third countries or other countries around the world and generate this foreign exchange. They need to buy what they don't have. Unfortunately, until we start doing that, I remember when I was doing my MBA in the 90s, I proposed I suggested, I'm not surprised that all this is happening. If you ask some scholars, I would say, most of these African leaders, I mean, I can only talk about Africans now, which is probably the same thing in India and other countries. But the Africans, personally, I don't think there's a need for any Africans to leave the shores of Africa as refugees. If the leaders, especially the African Union, they know what they're doing. You just need to bang their head together and come up with strategy. We want to take, for instance, you have Cocoa Tango. Ghana is doing something about processing cocoa and selling, chocolate and everything to the whole world instead of selling cocoa. So you have other countries now thinking, wearing their thinking hats on, that we need to start, adding value to all our own primary products, because selling them to the West is not going to work anymore. And as a Pan-Africanist, I think, we need to start putting our, thinking cap on and become strategic. Everything we could look at different regions in Africa where their own, comparative advantage. You can use that principle to set up certain industries, those parts, whereby, you can move. Thank God we have freedom of movement, as in ECOWAS, for instance. If you have industry, people can move from Nigeria to Ghana, from Ghana to, to East Africa. All these things can be done. It's just, I'm sorry, we have lazy leaders. I'm sorry, forgive me if I'm being blunt. We just have lazy African leaders who sit on their backside and expecting miracle to happen. This is 21st century, and they need to take responsibility. Enough talking, there need to be action from now.
And quickly, let's close with you on this, Collins. And we have to look at the effective way to stop human trafficking and the risk of illegal migration.
Well, obviously, the easiest route to achieving that is African leaders getting their acts together. I mean, as the politicking towards 2023, pushes on in Nigeria, there is this catchphrase by one of the presidential candidates: we need to transit from consumption to production. That even those in the villages, have caught up with that, statement, one-liner. Yes, I think it is important. Sonny alluded to it. Production, that's the way. Consumption. We are in Africa actually borrow to consume, not even to produce, and then creating. Liabilities, debt liabilities for, children yet unborn. There is no magic to it. The only magic to it is good governance, good leadership. Now, it doesn't mean that Africa hasn't got their sons and daughters with the capacity to, to lead the continent, they have. But Africa needs to get its politics right such that it attracts the right crop of people into leadership, be it in the private or in the public sector, to begin to turn things around. So I will conclude by lining up behind, that one-liner of from consumption to production. That is what Africa needs. And those who love Africa have got to support them along that line.
Well, that's a good place for us to say many thanks for being such nice company, Sonny, Lambe, and Nweke. And I hope we'll have this conversation again, specifically as Nigeria prepares for the coming elections. For all those watching across the continent, many thanks for watching. I'm Sulaiman. I'll see you again.